Shalom Charim. Guess what? You know, I just did the entire broadcast, guys, and I had no idea I'm sitting here talking to myself. So, this is about the funniest thing I have ever done. You know, I've done this before when I'm not live. You know, I'll do the entire broadcast, forget to push record on the camera. But I have never done a live broadcast before and do the entire live broadcast and have never pushed record or even started the streaming whatsoever. So, then I happen to click over here to say goodbye to everybody, and I see someone say on here, is Stephen 30 minutes late? Well, yes, I was 30 minutes talking to myself is what I was doing. So we get to start over. Let's hope my voice holds up for all of this. Listen, Clergy Response Team, that's what I was going into here tonight, and very troubling situation. And everything that I'm sharing with you guys is old news. I'm not sharing with you anything that is new, but I wanted to bring this up. I've talked about this day in and day out here recently, but I always forget the name of what we're dealing with, and that's the Clergy Response Team. But this is something that has become very serious, and it really caught my attention after Jeff Sessions made the statement that he did in defense of President Trump and what President Trump was doing as regards to the illegal aliens on the border that have been separated from their families, the children separated from the families. And again, for me, this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. All right, I realize Obama did the exact same thing. From what I understand, he was also separating the children from the families, but unfortunately, we never knew about it. It was only conspiracy theories at the time. Under Trump's administration, it became more prevalent. But what my concern is, and so that you really understand where I'm going with this, you're coming next. This is something that's going to happen to you guys. And while everybody's all excited about President Trump and think he's the greatest guy in the world, you have no idea that the clergy, the pastors of these churches, both evangelical and non-evangelical, have already sold you out. And you got your key verbiage when Jeff Sessions made this statement right here that I want to play for you now.
It should be, it must be. If you're going to have a legal system and have any limits whatsoever, persons who violate the law of our nation are subject to prosecution. If you violate the law, you subject yourself to prosecution. And I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government, because God has ordained the government for his purposes. The previous administration wouldn't prosecute aliens who entered the country with children. It was de facto open borders if you came with children.
Now, Jeff Sessions' own admission right here kind of slams a lot of people that say that Obama, because I saw one person that had posted Obama separated 89,000 children, whereas Trump only separated, I guess, what was it, about 20,000 children from their families. But Jeff Sessions says right here that Obama would not prosecute. All right. Now, after all, when we're talking about prosecution, does anyone know the statute regarding illegal entry into this country? It's a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor in the United States happens to be, well, what do you call it? Catch and release, like the Obama administration did. If you happen to violate the laws in this country under a misdemeanor, you're not taken to jail. You're taken and you're released. Or in this case here, even if we have to use a detention center, in America they were taken and putting bracelets upon them and telling them they had to come back for a court date for their asylum hearing. And again, I'm not for illegal immigration. I'm for equality and for the children that are suffering under, regardless of what administration it is. But this is not the issue to start with. The issue is what they're about to do to you. All right? This is where I'm going with this. You have no idea that this is coming against you. Jeff Sessions, he cites Romans 13. That is the Clergy Response Team playbook all over again. And there's not been a president in the entire history of the United States that has ever had more evangelical, Protestant, Catholic rabbinical leaders backing him than any other president in the history of the United States that I'm aware of. And I did some serious research trying to figure that one out. Obama surely didn't have that many, and Bush only had a couple. And, you know, I go back and I look at all this, but Trump is overwhelmed with them. 25 evangelical leaders, not counting the Catholics, the Lutherans, the Methodist leaders that are backing him and advisors to him, and the rabbis as well. Why? Because they're getting ready for a new world order, and you're going to be too blind and be drugged right into it because you're not paying attention. You're too caught up. You're too caught up hoping that things are going to get better and have no idea. Those of you that say, oh, you don't love Israel no more. No, I do love Israel. In fact, the thing is even with the broadcasts we're doing, we're having an effect on the Israeli government, because now the Israeli government on Twitter is doing ads out there saying that they're helping their neighbors, the Syrians. You know what that is? That's true Israelis that are preparing the humanitarian aids, where they raise the money themselves and raise the humanitarian aid, and then the Israeli military is moving it into the Syrian side there to help them. Well, thank God they're doing it. You know, you put the pressure on the government to react to Syria as your neighbor, as Moses commanded, and now they're trying to show the world that they're doing something. And I appreciate the fact, too, because our borders are closed to these people, just like the Jordanians are. But Israel is going to tell you that we've opened the borders. We only opened the border to severely wounded, and I thank God for that. But be a true neighbor as well then. And when you see a Syrian soldier injured on the battlefield like that, take him in as well. Don't do like Ms. Levny said of Israel, the Israeli government, who said they would never take in a Syrian soldier. That's hypocrisy. So we are having an impact. We're having an impact on our Israeli government and trying to get them to truly acknowledge the Syrians as our own people. As part, you know, I say our own people because our mothers were all Syrians. We are related to the Syrian people, regardless, whether you like it or not. And that doesn't mean Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra. That's the Syrian people. That's Bashar al-Assad's people. I don't care if they're Shiite, Sunni, or what they might be. You know, all these religious factions mean absolutely nothing. All right? So here's what's going on, though. The Clergy Response Team. All right? I want to play this clip for you here of the Clergy Response Team and what the government is planning on doing with you in the near future.
Ever become a reality in America? Some fear any nuclear, biological, or chemical attack on U.S. territory might trigger just that. And as KSLA News 12 Jeff Farrell discovered, the clergy would help the government with potentially their biggest problem: us.
From my cold, dead hand.
Charlton Heston's famous declaration captures a truly American value: the overarching desire to protect our freedoms. But gun confiscation is exactly what happened during the state of emergency following Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. U.S. troops also arrived, something far easier to do even now thanks to last year's elimination of the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. That forbid U.S. troops from policing on American soil. If martial law were enacted here at home, like depicted in the movie The Siege, easing public fears and quelling dissent would be critical. And that's exactly what the Clergy Response Team, as it's called, helped accomplish in New Orleans.
Jeff, the primary thing that we say to anybody is let's cooperate and get this thing over with, and then we'll settle the differences once the crisis is over.
Such Clergy Response Teams would walk a tightrope between the needs of the government versus the wishes of the public.
In a lot of cases, these clergy would already be known in the neighborhoods in which they're helping to defuse that situation.
For the clergy, one of the biggest
So the Homeland Security sitting there speaking about how the clergy is going to do it, and the clergy member there was speaking about how that they're going to help the U.S. government calm you down and separate this when it's all over and done. By the way, in case you're not aware of this, since President Trump has taken office, he's been working more and more, and it didn't start with him, it started under Obama's administration, working with the Mossad in Israel, and they work with FEMA and the Homeland Security here on how to deal with us one day. So when you think about how great it is for the Mossad and what all they do, don't forget the Mossad works for the Vatican, and of course they want to be able to deal with these unruly evangelicals out there that never really fully fell into order with Kenneth Copeland and some of the others out there that have been trying to lead you right down the paths of the Roman hierarchy and get you to follow into that order. No, they're going to put you in FEMA camps. And by the way, they're going to do with you exactly with what's happened to the children on the border of our country there. Oh yes, we could say that Obama did it as well, but Jeff Sessions' own words were that Obama was not prosecuting them, so they were going back together. Trump, on the other hand, was prosecuting all the misdemeanor offenders that were coming into our country illegally, which, by the way, it is a misdemeanor to enter into the country illegally, according to the United States penal codes that we have for that. So my issue that I'm trying to get you guys to really understand, this is not a Democrat, Republican, this is not President Trump, not President Bush or President Obama or Clinton or any of the rest of them, which most of them are nothing but a bunch of dope smuggling, pushing thugs to start with. This is about what they're going to do to you as Americans in the near future. They're only practicing with those that are coming in across the border right now. That's only practice. Now they'll get really good at it. In fact, when we were returning from Europe back to the United States there, as we were trying to get on the plane in Paris, France to head to the United States there, we were being questioned just as it was with the Israeli airport in Ben Gurion, which I'm kind of used to Israelis doing it. I always kind of get a kick out of it. I kind of help them along a little bit as we go. But with the Americans, or those that are working for the airlines that are bringing U.S. citizens back to the United States there, seeing them follow the same suit of Israeli airlines, well, I would think, one, it's more safer, yes, but the questions that were being asked me as a journalist was something that I did not anticipate, especially when I was being told that I must reveal any sources that I had in the media, and that was required for me to tell them any and all the sources that I use as a journalist. That was a bit odd. There's a lot of things going on, guys, that you're just not aware of. And it's going to happen, and it's going to happen pretty much overnight. I was thinking about the Romans chapter 13, and I thought about Chuck Baldwin. And Chuck Baldwin, let's see if I got it here. Yeah, here's Chuck right here. Chuck, I met Chuck one time before because a mutual friend of ours had passed away, and we sat together and talked actually the night that he was passing. We sat at the hospital together, talked extensively about different views that we had. And Chuck actually wrote pretty extensively about Romans chapter 13 and how that so many take this so naively and do not realize that not every government is set up by God. And he mentions like Hitler and Stalin and others like that. But he also mentioned something that I thought was interesting, and he started speaking about all the biblical forefathers that we have and how that they opposed the authorities of that day. And he asked the question, were they going against Romans chapter 13? Were they disobeying that? In fact, he said Paul spent more time in prison totally going against the government that was put into power. And he asked the question, was he violating civil government authority in doing so? And then he begins to mention many others as well. He says, did Moses violate God's principle of submission to authority when he killed the Egyptian taskmaster in defense of his fellow Hebrew? Did Elijah violate God's principle of submission to authority when he openly challenged Ahab and Jezebel? Did David violate God's principle of submission to authority when he refused to surrender to Saul's troops? Did Daniel violate God's principle of submission to authority when he disobeyed the king's law to not pray audibly to God? Did the three Hebrew children violate God's principle of submission to authority when they refuse to bow to the image of the state? Did John the Baptist violate God's principle of submission to authority when he publicly scolded King Herod for his infidelity? Did Simon Peter and other apostles violate God's principle of submission to authority when they refused to stop preaching on the streets of Jerusalem? Did Paul violate God's principle of submission to authority when he refused to obey those authorities who demanded that he abandon his missionary work? In fact, Paul spent almost as much time in jail as he did out of jail. Now that's something to think about when it comes to Romans chapter 13 as far as the way it is being put to us by the Clergy Response Team. And of course there was one of the clergy actually began to reveal exactly what they're planning on doing. He said, I have discovered that the clergy response teams are taking on much more nefarious duties, and it can be accurately stated that the pastors associated with the DHS FEMA clergy response teams are going to be doing a whole lot more than encouraging their flocks to obey the government. On December 9, 2014, I conducted a telephonic interview with Pastor Walt Mansfield. Pastor Mansfield was among the first of the pastors recruited to become a part of the clergy response team. The revelations he conveyed to me about this program had pastors doing a whole lot more than preaching Romans 13. But before going to that disturbing content of the interview, let's take a look at relevant legislation which helps legitimize Pastor Mansfield's outrageous claims. You know, now let me kind of jump over some of that right there. He was recruited to become a member of the clergy response team, which would operate under the control of the NOVAD, and DHS Mansfield's revelation about his experience was stunning and concerning at the same time. He attended several briefings and he could barely believe his ears. He learned of the government's plan to enact martial law as well as to implement forced population relocation. Mansfield emphasized that when martial law is enacted, the enforcement will be immediate. In other words, family members will be separated from each other. Part of the training that the clergy received was how to comfort separated family members. Mansfield emphasized that the FEMA DHS drills were predicated on bioterrorism. The pastors were trained to go to homes where people refused to be relocated by authorities, and their immediate job was to convince the reluctant to go willingly to relocate to camps. Ostensibly, this was to be done in lieu of sending in SWAT teams. All right? FEMA camps were real, and he stated that much of the clergy training focused around this scenario of pastors operating within the forced relocation centers. The main goal of the pastors assigned to a FEMA was to bring order and to encourage compliance with the DHS requests, hence the emphasis on Romans 13. And it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. You know what's really sad? I began to do research on this and try to go deeper. And the one thing that I really thought that if I looked deep enough, I would find the exact same thing in the Holocaust with rabbis. But you know, I didn't find it with rabbis. The rabbis didn't sell their people out. You want to know why? Because the rabbis are not 501c, or at least they weren't back during the times of Germany. But these 501c hirelings, as Jesus calls them, are only for the dollar, making sure they make what they can off of you, tax-free, courtesy of the government, and in exchange they will obey what the government says to do, which, by the way, a 501c cannot speak against the Vatican either. But oddly enough, in Germany, it just so happened to be the Protestants were the ones that worked so closely with Hitler. Now, they've already rewritten the history about the Catholic Church to make sure that Pope Pius XII looks like a knight in shining armor. But the Protestants were definitely thrown under the bus as being the very co-conspirators with Nazi Germany in selling out the Jews to the concentration camps. Now, wait till you hear, those of you that will be coming here to Orlando, what I tell you about that. I've actually got the recording where your evangelicals today are exonerating Pope Pius XII and intentionally throwing the Protestants under the bus. And yet the Protestant evangelical leaders are going to sell you everyone out. That's what I'm trying to warn you about. And instead, everybody's too busy to want to beat up Brother Steve, beat the messenger, because we don't want to hear the truth. We want to know that everything's perfectly okay. Jeff Sessions, give you your warning. You should have took the warning. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live. Stand and support our real work. We do need your help. IsraeliNewsLive.org or Patreon.com/IsraeliNewsLive. Hope to see you soon in Orlando. Those of you that can make it, don't forget to email us, StephenBenNoon@gmail.com. Let us know. We do have limited seating. I am already starting a list of those that are coming. If there's someone coming with you, please let us know. It'll be a first-come, first-served basis. We have 100 seats total at the facility there, and we do need to know each person that is actually coming. And once we get to that maxed out, then we will let you know that we're maxed out at this time. God bless you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for support of this ministry. And shalom in a world of ain't shalom. There is no peace.